Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another Sea Stories, a great series of interviews that I've been privileged to do and host for 3 years, if you can believe it. And tonight we have a real treat. I'm up here in the chilly north with snow around my ankles, talking to Lin Pardey, a half a world away in New Zealand, and it's summer. Hey, Lin, how are you?
Very good today.
I'm
Thank you.
so glad you could join us. Thank you so much. You're over there in the sunny climes of New Zealand right now. Tell us about what it's like there.
Well, we're very fortunate. The weather's absolutely beautiful right now. It's midsummer and boats are all arriving. This weekend is anniversary regatta weekend. This,
Oh, that's wonderful.
for Auckland. And there's wonderful occasions and reasons for people to sail up to the island where I live, partially
Yeah.
because it's got the best anchorages in all of the Hauraki
Well, of
Gulf.
course, that's why you're there, right?
That's what we chose it for. Absolutely 360-degree protection.
I just love that. It's such an amazing feat that I can be talking to you live like this. It's crazy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before we get too deep into this, we've got a little bit of housekeeping. I am currently running a chat window and I'm running a Q&A window. If you have questions during our time, you can put them over in the questions. And of course, the chat allows you to chat amongst yourselves and also to us. So what we'd like to do to give that a quick test, like we always do, if you would just type in where you're signing in from. I'll type Annapolis, and let's see where it comes out. Whoa, look at all these people. Quebec, Fairfax. Can you see that, Lynn?
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing, isn't it? Ensenada, how about that? Well, that's very exciting.
Canada.
Drummond Island, oh my goodness. That's got to be Huron Jewel. Yeah, wasn't that wonderful? Well, thank you very much, everyone. It's great to see you aboard, and I think we're rolling. This is all good. Now, Lynn, you've written a book, and we're going to talk about that book a little bit today. This is Passages, Cape Horn and Beyond. And Lynn's going to show us the book now. We practiced this. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about this book. What is it supposed to be? Is this sort of a retrospective? Is this a choosing of your favorite things in the past 40 some years? Or tell me a little bit about the book.
Well, this particular book I wrote about when to explain how it felt to reach the pinnacle of our sailing career and finally try something that Larry very much wanted to do, which was to go around Cape Horn and against the prevailing winds, you know, Atlantic to Pacific, so that we could finally say that we had gone around all of the great southern capes contrary to the wind. But it was his dream, not particularly mine, and it was how I got convinced to do it. But
Yeah,
also the realization that that passage marked the change in our life that occurred when you've done everything you ever dreamed of doing, and now you're looking beyond towards the
yeah,
future. And of course, it had to deal with my passages, which is about ending up having to take more and more responsibility for our sailing life as Larry's age started telling him.
sure.
But it also was the first chance I had to do some comparisons, and I was able to write some of the stories about what was my absolute best passages, what was my favorite passages. So it allowed me to be reflective. And it was challenging book to write because I had to write a little bit about unhappy things, but also trying to decide how to keep a story flowing about the personal life and about the sailing.
Yeah.
And
Lynn,
hopefully,
you
yeah.
you have such a wonderful way of writing in the first person and engaging us emotionally as you write. And I think that's what brings those chapters and makes them flow together like that. And my apologies for interrupting you. Go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. But I also wanted to encourage people because and share some of the real highlights of sailing. And in a way, I think I wrote it also to show how heavy weather is an important part of sailing and learning to be, if not comfortable, but accepting and knowing how, what does it feel like to be in heavy weather.
Sure. Sure.
And so there's some heavy weather here in the book,
There
but
is.
I wrote it because I love writing and I love sailing, and somehow I'm trying to share the pure joy of sailing with other people. And it's one of the reasons I've always liked the writing I've been able to do.
And I get that. Tell me about your process. You want to write a book. How does it begin?
Well, in my earliest days, it happened because Larry and I wanted to share what it was like to have a small boat and not a lot of money and go sailing. And we were having such a good time, and I talk about it in the book how I got challenged to write, and I tried, and I found I love the process of writing and starting with a one story at a time.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do like writing the practical books, like, my favorite book I ever wrote was The Self-Sufficient Sailor,
Yeah.
because pure
It's
practicalities of
certainly
sailing.
one of the most famous books on the shelves right now.
Yeah, and the Storm Tactics Handbook was a necessity because we saw people getting into trouble or being terrified of heavy weather instead of learning about what to do and how to take care of the boat. And we also found that people didn't know one of the most important things there is in sailing, and that's how to stop the boat and get some rest, just not just because of heavy weather, but because you're just tired or you don't feel like going to windward and you know the wind's going to change in a day or two, so why keep bashing on?
Yeah. Heaving
So,
too. Yeah.
yeah, heaving too. So, each book started for a different reason, but interestingly, I'm just now starting a project that because uh, I think I love having the projects.
Yeah.
And it started because I've been trying to write a novel for years, and I realized the incident that the novel would have been about is important to share with people, because I think it'll save some lives, actually. So I start with this idea of what I'd like to write about, and then I start looking for the information that will make it come to life. And
Hmm.
the next thing I do is I try to find a beginning, some place to get into that story, because there's dozens of ways to get into a story, and that was part of the fun of Passages. Is
Yeah.
I had I can't just start out once upon a time I went sailing,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and I can't start out we're sailing to Cape Horn, so I had to say, well, how do I start this book? And I think I came up with a really good way of getting people involved
Well,
before I started talking about the really rough sailing.
yeah. It's funny. We talked about this earlier. And for those of you who have read Lynn's books, they all sort of start with a bang and a hook, which we call in music a hook. And this particular book starts with a wonderful hook. It's a story about a hook.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know,
but
I'm gonna take a trip here, and we're gonna ask you just for a short reading, and then we're gonna get into your slideshow if that's okay for you. You always start your books with a hook, and in Passages, I found there's no disappointment. The end of this chapter finds Sahula. Now, this is David Haig's boat, and you were sailing with him at the time in Fiji. And you've got broken ribs, if I remember. You're finishing a shower at the yacht club, and David's watching a large storm sweep across the harbor. Unbeknownst to you, a large ship is broken free from her mooring, and Sahula is now aground. Would you give us a sense of place and sort of pick up at I grabbed my shower bag?
well, we're talking about Suva Harbor. We've just arrived after what was not a bad passage, except that I forgot to hold on when I was down below, and at the middle of the night, I was thrown across the cabin and ended up with 5 broken ribs and 8 fractures, and slightly punctured lung, not bad. But so we've now, several days later, arrived, and I'm supposedly on the way to the hospital to have myself checked, although I told David I was breathing. I was, the pain had gone down. He said no, but then as we're having our very first dinner ashore after a shower and getting ready to call a taxi or get a taxi to the hospital, a very large squall came flying in at 50 or 60 knots. And we saw boats dragging through the harbor. We saw ships moving. And David said, we got to get out and see how Sahula is. And I didn't have any wet weather gear with me. We just come ashore on a beautiful afternoon. And as I'll read here, we headed towards the boat. I gingerly climbed into the dinghy. It wasn't easy. It was bucking around terribly, and I could only use one arm. So it starts here. I grabbed my shower bag and towel and moved as quickly as I could. Even inside the protective breakwater of the club, the 8-foot inflatable dinghy was pitching and bobbing wildly. I nursed my shore side as I climbed in gingerly. Once I was thoroughly drenched by the relatively warm rain, I got caught up in the drama of the scene. Palm trees bent and whipped, halyards clanged as we coursed down the length of the yacht club marina. But the minute we cleared the sheltering breakwater, all I felt was disbelief. 3-foot waves swept across the mile-wide lagoon. I couldn't locate Sahula's exceptionally bright masthead light. She's probably hidden by that ship, David yelled over the screeching wind as we surfed down another wave. The propeller of the 4-horsepower outboard roared, then settled momentarily into a more natural sound as it bit into unaerated water, only to roar again as we surfed off the crest of the next wave. As we cleared the ship, David yelled, "There's her light, something's wrong." As each gust of wind hit, I could see Sahula rock to leeward to lie over at a 15 or 20-degree angle. Waves breaking against her windward side, her masthead scribing a wide arc as each gust eased off. "She's aground," David yelled as we came along her leeward side. "Do you think you can get on board?" I do not remember getting on board. I do not remember feeling any pain. Adrenaline had kicked in as I climbed out of that bucking dinghy and scrambled up the steeply canted deck, shielding my face from the heavy spray and slashing rain. David leaped out of the dinghy, literally he leapt, and rushed forward. "The anchor, it's gone. So is all the chain," he shouted. "The lines securing it to the boat snapped. Get on the radio and call Pan Pan." I didn't hesitate. I climbed into the cockpit, down the companionway, and forgetting my reluctance to use radios and my inexperience, switched on the VHF. "Pan, Pan, Pan. This is the vessel Sahula. We are aground."
Wow. How about that? And the whole thing happened because a large ship broke free of her mooring and dragged across you and a lot of other boats, didn't it?
Yeah, it hit 5 boats, and but we were the first, and thank God the chain snapped, because she was lying alongside this 200-foot long ship and being rolled under the bilge of the big ship when the chain broke.
Whew.
Someone saw it, told us. Yeah.
That's a way to start a book.
Well, it was a way to start a new romance. David and I
I
have just,
know. Now tell me about that. Now you've met David now. Tell me about meeting and how you guys came to be cruising together in the first place.
well, Larry had been in care for quite a while, and I had just started dating because I felt I'd like to get out and do a lot more socializing in life.
Yeah.
And um, really, I was looking to buy a sailboat. I'd been looking at some 26 footers down here that I particularly like, some Townsend 26, so that I could get off on my own. I didn't dream of single-handed sailing, but I don't like not being able to go places in a boat.
Yeah.
And just about that time, um, a single-handed sailor finishing. Well, he was in New Zealand planning to sail on to Australia to finish a 10-year circumnavigation. And to make a very brief summary, a friend introduced us. David came over for drinks. We had a fun evening together talking about common ground. And he had a 40-foot steel boat. Very relatively simple by today's standards. And he sailed off, and I thought nothing of it. And 7 months later, well, a very coincidental situation happened, and someone invited him to come to my house for dinner. And he never went home.
Really?
or we went home. No, we did hit it off, and we still do. But David was planning some more sailing and invited me to sail down to Fiordland in New Zealand with him. And it became a regular thing.
That's a wonderful story. I so enjoyed meeting him when you guys came to Annapolis.
And he enjoyed meeting you.
Well, how could he not?
And he was just now at lunchtime talking about his absolute surprise when you invited him to have a crab sandwich at some cafe. And he said, and this sandwich arrived with these legs dangling out of it.
He ordered a soft crab sandwich, which, as we call it here, is just nothing but a spider sandwich. And you've got the crab legs hanging out. Oh, my goodness gracious. And what a good sport he was. We had a dandy time. He did everything he could to put my lee rail under, and God bless him for that. It's all good. We're going to run through some slides that you have. I'm going to take a quick break here for a little station identification, my friends. If you have any questions for Lin, type them in and type amongst yourselves for a moment. And here comes a little bit about the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race. Oh, here we go.
It's a 127-mile overnight race from Annapolis, Maryland to Norfolk, Virginia. It's a celebration of a race to market from an age that has passed into history, a time when the Chesapeake Bay hosted passenger steamers and was peppered with working boats and pleasure craft, all under sail. This is an invitation to take part in a celebration, an invitation to get out on the bay, strut your stuff, spend time with friends, and put some wind in the sails of your beautiful boat. This is an invitation to join the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race. After more than 35 years, the Schooner Race has decided to add an invitational class for non-schooner boats that would like to join us in the fun. Now, whether you have a schooner or classic vessel that harkens back to that age of sail, we're inviting you to join us. This race runs the length of the bay, and participants encounter all sorts of different conditions. It's challenging, and it's a great deal of fun. From the parade of sail in Baltimore's Inner Harbor, to the crack of the starting cannon off Annapolis, to the early morning finish at Thimble Shoal Light at the mouth of Hampton Roads, this is a race designed to celebrate your rig, whether classic yawl, ketch, sloop, workboat, or schooner. It's a chance to test your skills and enjoy the camaraderie of new friends and old. It's a chance to be part of something big and something meaningful. As an invitational class, the criteria are simple. If you have a vessel, modern or not, which is reminiscent of the age of schooners, you are welcome to join us. In addition, if you or your organization have a mission compatible with ours, promoting awareness of the Chesapeake Bay's heritage and ecology, and or preserving these historic vessels, you'd be welcome to join us too. Applications will be considered by our race committee, and if they feel that your boat or organization would fit our parameters, you're in for a wonderful experience. Join us. Let's get your boat on the line. Or if you know of anyone else who might fit our criteria, send this over to them. Let's keep this great event alive and let's give back to those who live along our shores. Join us for the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race. It's a ride to remember. To find out more about the race and our mission of supporting not-for-profit organizations on and around the Bay, please visit us at gcbsr.org.
Life is good, yeah. Life is good, yeah. Yeah, in my darkest times, you got me feeling like I've been walking on air. Left all my worries and cares. I've got nobody around you. I don't care who knows I love you. 'Cause I've been so lost without you. And in my darkest times, you got me feeling like
And there you go. Station identification. That's what I do out here. And if anybody would like to join us, we would sure love to have you for the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race. Lynn, you've got some wonderful slides here. It's great to be back with you. Let's pick it up and tell us what we're seeing.
Well, once upon a time, I met a sailor, blue-eyed Canadian accent, and on our first date, he took me along. Oops, we're having trouble here.
Oh no.
My slideshow, there we go.
There we go.
Yeah, he took me up to see his etchings, as I jokingly say. He took me to see his boat that he was starting to build, and all he had was a loft floor and a keel timber. We spent the day together. It was literally our first date. And at the end of the day, I said to him, boy, that was really like going on an adventure. I just had a great day with you. And his exact words were, stick with me, baby, and you'll go a long way.
Man, truer words were never spoken.
No, never spoken. But what he didn't warn me about was that the long way included 700 sheets of sandpaper, cutting and fitting 2,480 wood plugs, and learning to take them off with a chisel. But together we worked for 3.5 years to earn the money and to build this 24-foot 4-inch sailboat. He'd been a racing skipper, and he was a charter skipper when I met him on quite a large charter boat. Well, large for those days. It was a 26-tonner. And but he chose a 24-foot boat because he said, I knew I could get it built in a reasonable time.
Mm.
He's a master woodworker. He really just a natural at woodworking. But little 24-foot Seraphim, we didn't put an engine in.
Where are we here?
We're in the Baltic at Helsingør Castle, just entering the Baltic. It's blowing 50 knots, believe it or not. And the National Geographic photographer was willing to pay us to fly a spinnaker past this very boring looking castle.
At 50 knots?
Well, when we got there and it was time to do the shoot, it was blowing 50 knots, and he was in love with the sky, and he said, come on, this is even better. And he gave us this photograph, Tom Nibia, an amazing National Geographic photographer. But little Seraphim, she was, as I say, 24 feet long. We didn't put an engine in her because we didn't have the money. It was a choice of heading off to Mexico with enough money to live on for 4 or 5 months, or putting in an engine. We said, let's go sailing, and we'll come back and put an engine on after we worked another year. But we just never came back. We continued onwards. We were having such a good time. People kept asking us to deliver a boat or fix a boat. So we meandered onward, as many people know, for 11 amazing years on our little 20.
That's how you made your money, isn't it? By picking up deliveries and
That's right.
all that until your writing really kicked in.
Yeah.
Now, where are we here, and what are we looking at?
Well, here we're in 1977 sailing through the Langkawi Islands after going around most of the world. And we were headed home to Canada or California, we weren't sure which, because we felt it was time to build a boat that would allow us to live aboard in really wintry climates, because we wanted to explore more. And we also wanted a chance to just stop and be somewhere for a while. So and Larry wanted to write a book on boat building.
Mm,
And he said, I need the photographs. So if I take photographs every day of a boat I'm building, I can show people. Because Larry was the kind of person who learned better from being shown or photographs. He wasn't the one who could just read from a manual.
yeah, a
And he
lot of us
thought if he
are.
could,
Yeah.
yeah. So that was his dream, to build a really highly illustrated book
Was it
on.
also his dream to build a boat up in the foothills of California?
That was an accident. That was definitely an accident. We'll get to that here. But we we continued on, and the sailing was always interesting. Met amazing people along the way. The hardest voyage we ever took on Little Seraphim was across the North Pacific from Japan. It could have been a nice voyage had the winds been normal for that year, but we both knew one thing, and that was it was going to be a long voyage, and Larry was worried I'd drive him crazy, cooped up on a boat for 4,500 miles. So he bought me a guitar, thought that maybe I'd like learning how to play the guitar. And you think that's pictures about the guitar? No, I actually show this picture for another reason. If you look carefully, I had just, before we left Japan, we're coming home with a boat that Larry's friends had never seen. He'd never sailed the boat to Canada, and he was a Canadian from Vancouver. So we wanted it looking really nice when we got there. So I varnished everything in Japan. I just got her looking
Oh my
spiffy.
goodness.
But Larry came rushing out of the cabin out of the forehatch without asking me what I was up to, and you can see the footprint he put in that hatch.
I can.
Yes, so there it is. But why did we end up building our next boat on, in the mountain canyon with no electricity, no telephones, no running water, and a road that used to disappear every time it rained? We found Canada was not the right place for us. We couldn't get the supplies we wanted, and we would have had to have a heated shed that was getting, quite expensive. So we went down to California where we'd built before, and the more we looked, the less luck we had in finding a place that would be quiet so I could write and that we could afford. And then a friend said, look, I own this old stone cottage on a property that I bought out in the middle of nowhere. But if you guys want to help me fix it up a bit, you can have it for free. You can
Perfect. Yeah.
So that's how we ended up building a boat in a place called Bull Canyon. But
Which
it
was
was,
a heck of a book too, I might point out.
yes. Well, that was the first memoir I ever wrote, and it was that was good fun to write. I really loved writing that book. But so
Ooh,
there she
look at
is.
this. My goodness.
Yeah, and this is the inside of Taliesin. She's 29 ft 6 inches. We actually cut the timber for all the framing in Virginia. It's black locust. And Larry flew to Hong Kong. No, wait a minute. No, that came from Singapore. That was from Singapore,
Yeah.
where we found a supply of teak, Burmese teak, that was caught up in a company had gone bankrupt, and they were selling this Burmese teak logs at a very reasonable price. So when we were in Singapore, we bought the teak and cut it there from logs into the timber. So we're very involved in this boat right from the beginning.
My gosh, how did you get it back to the States?
That was easy. You just search around and find a shipping company. It was amazing how but um, it was a friend stored it for us until we got home.
Mm. Mhm.
So it was an absolute joy building that boat. Some of the weather we had up there and the fire threats and such were interesting.
I
It
can
was an
believe it.
adventure. It was probably
Oh,
the biggest adventure in my life, was building that boat.
yeah. Yeah,
So,
yeah. And
so
I imagine with the fires going on now, it gives you a real pause.
Yeah, I think about that quite a bit. But
But yeah.
the most danger that boat has ever been in was the 55 miles of freeway between Lake Elsinore and Newport Beach.
Hmm.
And I was following her when she went to be launched, and with my father and his truck, and the a car blew a tire, went out of control, swerved in front of the truck with the boat on it. The truck, of course, took evading action, and the chocks holding the boat broke.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so we had to jack the boat back up and put her, so, but that was, if people say, isn't dangerous out there in the ocean? I say, what about on the freeways? So that's the very first sailing shot of Taliesin with her reefing Genoa. So that was
Nice.
because to cut down on the number of sails we had to carry. We
Yeah. So
put a reef into
you're
it.
off in California here.
This is actually, yeah, in Southern California.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So she was to us a much bigger boat. We built her the way we wanted her. She had a bathtub underneath the companionway ladder that we use as a showering tub.
Really?
The top two steps just pop away very easily. But she was a wonderful boat to live on, and we could carry provisions for up to 5 months. We had absolutely clean bilges because we did not have a inboard engine. Uh, and that gave me space for 140 bottles of wine in the bilges.
Ballast.
But look, we had amazing adventures. We sailed here for many, many years and many thousands. We sailed about 85,000 miles before we headed for Cape Horn. Now,
Yeah.
why did we decide to go to Cape Horn? We circumnavigated on her going west about somewhat the more normal route. Of course, we varied it from the norm by going south of Australia and to the, far south of Tasmania, and some amazing voyaging. And we spent several years cruising the Atlantic, including, I figured out we had 5 crossings of the Atlantic because we'd hear of another really good party going or a race week that we couldn't resist, or the festivals of Europe. We meandered around, but then at one point Larry said, Lynn, I want to get back to the Pacific. It's time. And I said, great. And I started grabbing charts from the back of a Walker for Panama area. And Larry said, no, no, no. Lynn, I don't like the tropics. I've been through the Panama Canal enough. I want to go around Cape Horn.
And you said,
And I said, at my age, Larry, I've got nothing to prove. And he retorted without a second's pause, at your age, you got nothing to lose. So, but we had serious discussions, but he agreed to my suggestion that we not tell anyone what we were planning. If we got towards Argentina, we'd say to people we were headed to Argentina to learn tango. And that way, if I was really uncomfortable at any point, I could say, that's it. Let's head back to Africa. Because I did want to go back to spend more time in Southern Africa. We had such an amazing time there.
well, that in itself says a whole lot about the relationship you had with Larry and
Yeah.
the mutual respect that you guys had going at the time.
Yeah. So here we are sailing south towards, you can see the big nylon drifter. We had quite amazing sailing getting from the Chesapeake across to the Azores. Spent several months there waiting for the hurricanes to go by and exploring the outer islands of the Azores. And then down past the Verds to Mar del Plata, where we did a final refit. But as we got down to the southern waters, I started to realize, yeah, there's good days, there's bad days, there's some wonderful sailing along the South American coast. But what I loved most of all was the albatross, because
Ah,
we're all, uh,
are they
you
going
know,
after a fishing line here?
well, that's the interesting thing. They're trying to get our taffrail log spinner. And that we spent time sometimes with several hundred, maybe thousand of these albatross flying along. And we had several nice light wind days, and they were hilarious. They would fly ahead and land. We'd sail past them, and then they'd fly ahead of us again. And this went on leapfrogging for about 3 days.
Oh, it sounds
And
beautiful. My
it
gosh.
was wonderful. But as we approached, after doing our refit in Mar del Plata and then sailing south and stopping in Deseado, Puerto Deseado, we headed south towards Staten Island and the Straits of La Mer. And
Yeah.
for those who don't know anything about the Straits of La Mer, the straits between Staten Island and the hook of South America, the end of the Andes, there's a strait that's 16 miles wide, but only 8 of it is truly navigable because there's, some rocks and bad upwellings. And the pilot books and the routing books talk about the overflows that can be up to 20 feet high.
What?
When the wind opposes tide, they've recorded up to 30-foot overfalls. But the reason for that is the current at the north side of this 8-mile long channel, the tidal range can be up to 40 feet rise and fall in a day. 8 miles further south, when you're actually under the end of South America, the rise and fall is only a meter to a meter and a half. So it's 3 to 5 feet of rise and fall.
That's
So you
over a
get these,
16-mile range, right?
okay. So 8 miles, when you start into the channel, it's only 8 miles long. It's 16 miles wide, but 8 miles long. And on one side, you got a 40-foot rise and fall of tide. On the other side, you've got 3 to 5 foot. So you get currents running through there, opposing each other. And the current running against you, no matter how strong the south-going current is, there's always an underlying north-going current. So the waters get churned up pretty bad. But we came running in with 25 knots of wind on our stern, running wing and wing, hit at exactly the right time of the tides, when it's recommended that the overfalls are the least. And 3 miles into the straits, frontal system came by, and here we are. This is actually a picture taken after we'd sorted everything out, and our Hove 2 got shoved right back out of that canal. Well, it took 3 days to make it through, because every time when the fronts would go through, and 12, 14 hours later, another one would come right through just at the wrong time for us. So it was quite a challenge.
Well, I see you've got your storm try up, and
Yeah.
so you would just hunker down and get blown back out again.
Got blown back out, but we didn't lose too much, but yes, we got blown back.
Yeah.
But let's say once we did get through, it was a master course in going to windward, because the Cape Horn lay at just 180 miles past where when we got through, 120 miles. And unfortunately, we learned why the big ships had so much trouble.
Mm.
It wasn't only the strong winds, it was the fact that the winds were so changeable. The winds would drop off to almost nothing, very light winds, and then they'd come back up to, front would come through 8 hours later, 14 hours later,
Mhm.
with 50 or 60 knots of wind. And to add to that, there's always an east-going current of 2 knots,
Wow.
up to 2 knots, 2.5
So you're
knots.
busy changing sails. You're busy. When do you sleep?
Well, let's just say on one day we did 13 sail changes. And of those, 5 times we put the nylon drifter up. I've got records of all of this. It was just, it was hard work. It was work.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
long story short, and that little tiny sail you see there, we call that the toy sail. That's a little staysail that we could use as a staysail, or we could use it as a jib out on the end of the bowsprit.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I thought it was a joke when Larry talked me into buying it. And I called it the toy sail because it was only 40 square feet. But it did keep us driving to windward.
Yeah. So between that and the storm try, you could
we had
make
a lot of options.
progress. Yeah.
So, but after 7 days, 5 or 7 days, I forgot, several days of trying to beat from the channel, the Straits of Lamar to actual reach Cape Horn, we had a gas cylinder fail. First time we've ever had a gas cylinder, anything like that. But we had 3 tanks of butane.
Hmm.
We used it for heating, we used it for cooking,
Yeah.
and that meant we were really running low. And then Larry accidentally opened the hatch without being careful and got drenched, and we ran out of dry clothes for him. So you could see the entrance of the Beagle Canal, and we diverted. And that was one of the more enjoyable diversions I've ever had in my life, was the month we spent wandering around the Beagle Canal.
This is the great story about coming in and talking to the port warden, and he didn't want you to leave.
Yeah, well, that was interesting, getting my paperwork cleaned up but so here, this is a favorite picture only because it's such a coincidence. People who've read about sailing around the Cape Horn area know about McCalvey, and that is a sunken ship that's in Puerto Williams, which is where you have to get any paperwork done to go into any of the canals at the south of Patagonia. It's a Chilean port. And McCalvey has been turned into an officers' yacht club and welcomes foreign yachts on this sunken ship. They've got a wonderful bar built there. But in this far corner of the world, we were quite amazed that there were 3 yachts tied up the day we got there. A 4th one came in. All 3 on this side of the ship were from New Zealand.
No
So,
way.
and then the other one was the American Eagle, and I knew the crew from previous experience, so it was party time. True party time. And just to show people how things have changed, the only internet available in 2002 when we were in Puerto Williams was the Navy's computer, and they invited me to come in and look at it and study the weather
So this
because
is the Navy's computer down there?
this is the naval office, and they were interested in what weather information we could find. So I was there every day for a couple hours in the morning because each page took 20 to 25 minutes to load. So this is how I was able to find what looked like a very good weather patch for us. The only problem is that when it finally came in good, because the weather moves fast down there, because the world's smaller down there,
Yeah.
the distance around. And the only problem was that there was actually a fair wind forecast that would last for a day and a half or 2, possibly. But they were talking about 6 or 8 knots of wind, which for us is wonderful.
Yeah.
But to get down there, the 100 miles down to the last 100 miles down to the Cape, we had to leave and catch that wind. We had to leave while it was blowing a full gale and sleet and snow at 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning to catch the current going the right way. But long story short, we did, and we sailed around Cape Horn to get the one record we actually hold. We are the smallest vessel without an engine using traditional navigation to have gone around all the Great Southern Capes, contrary to the wind, carrying a nylon drifter. Because this is something Larry and I, after the good luck of going around Cape of Good Hope with the nylon drifter, we said, let's just keep doing it if we can. So we carried that nylon drifter.
That's a wonderful story. And you made it
Yeah,
around in good weather, and all of a sudden, kaboom.
Yeah, well, when we got out of just as we passed out of the screaming 50s into the roaring 40s, let's just say that's when the boat was tested fully, and I was tested fully, and the boat came through with flying colors, and I came through okay. Larry was amazing, the way he handled the situation when it was blowing 85 knots and he had to take the cover off of the wind vane and put a reef in the storm trysail. He did it. He just did it.
My
So
goodness
there's
gracious.
how many people have reefed a storm tristle? I don't
I,
think that many. But she rode amazingly well
yeah.
through huge seas. But we never put the parachute anchor out because she was riding so well because the seas were so widely spaced.
Mm-hmm.
She's been closer together. Yes, they were 40 and 50 feet high because we did have 85 knots of wind for quite a while.
Do you think
But
it made a huge amount of difference because uh, the boat was so small?
I don't know small. I just think she was riding properly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that we kept her in the right position. We had lots of sea room. We were not on the continental shelf, that's for sure. We were 150 miles offshore, 120, I think, at this time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a real Cape Horn story. There's a bit of a
Huh.
gray bird coming out, but you know, the most beautiful sight I've ever seen. I didn't quite catch it on this picture, but the sunlight coming through the tops of those seas, towering seas, and yet the sunlight sparkling through, saying, "You're okay, girl. You're okay." So here's this. You can see the seas were breaking forward of us, but with the parachute anchor, excuse me, with the boat properly hove to, without any parachute anchor, her slick was breaking down the crest. We could see that, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why it all
So you
worked.
positioned it kind of a close reach sort of angle?
Yeah, as close as we could get her. You know, she was about 50 degrees off the wind,
Be about
55.
right.
But oh, you're going to imagine how thrilled I was to see the mountains of around Puerto Montt as we reached up the coast. And I think one of my favorite chapters in this particular book is about the beautiful drift up through the Chilean canals
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
the joy of being why we sail without an engine. I think that's one time I've actually fully explained the pleasure we got from, well, it was our cup of tea. It was, I don't think I would have kept cruising year in, year out if it hadn't been for the challenge of being engine free.
Well, there's that, and there's also the fact that you were not using any electronic navigation at that time. This is
That
all
didn't
done,
ever, yeah.
yeah, time, speed, and distance at taffrail and star sights.
Yeah. So there she is saying it. So just to quickly, so we can get back to our discussion. So
Mhm.
that's my absolute favorite boat in the whole world, and definitely my favorite man. And no insult to David, he's has to take. He's willing to take second place because he knows 55 years was a just about a perfect partner. It's hard to beat, but I did meet David, and he made me laugh, and he still can make me laugh.
Isn't that a wonderful thing?
Yeah, and we
And he
have
has an engine.
he has an engine. I love that little black button on the forward end of the deck where I put my toe on it and the anchor comes up
The
all by
anchor comes up.
itself. I do
Yeah,
love that.
the power
Uh,
windlass is a good thing.
Having a electric windows. There's my, he's just a big kid. He's very different than Larry. They have nothing in common other than they think I'm wonderful. I got him fooled.
Tell us
And
about Mickey Mouse Marine.
oh, we'll go back to Mickey Mouse Marine
Yeah, go
there.
back. Tell us about Mickey Mouse Marine.
Well, we have this little home here on that Larry and I found. It was a you hear of rescue dogs. Well, there was a rescue house. It needed someone to repair everything. It was falling down, but it had a boat shed and a license to do boat repairs. And so Larry and I were able to have a home base where we could earn the money to fix it up. And that's where I wrote. That's where we wrote Larry's boat building book. But we did repair other people's boats, and one day we had 3 different boats under repair, plus Taliesin on the title grid in front of the shop. 22 people busily working away. 4 of them we were paying, the others were owners. And one of the owners said, "This place might be a bit Mickey Mouse, but we get a lot done." And a few weeks later, another person who'd been there working that day gave me this sign as a gift,
Oh,
and it
it's
stuck.
oh, that's just a great story.
So, but David is an Australian, and of course, the attraction of finishing his trip and introducing me to his world, uh, I couldn't resist, and we headed off together in about almost 8 years ago now. And
Oh,
this is actually in Tasmania in a place called Port Davies on the backside of Tasmania. Magnificent area. And the only way you
incredible.
get there, you can get there by boat. You can hike for 8 days to get there, or you can come in by a little seaplane. But
Mhm.
it's very isolated. And
Mm.
David is a mountain climber and still does serious trekking, and that's Mount Rugby, which he just had to climb. So it's across the way.
Nice.
But the fun thing for me is David's boat is very different. He's not a woodworker. He says I'm a professional pen pusher. He was an environmental law expert.
Uh,
And so I've been, we've been upgrading the boat. It's an older boat. The woodwork was a bit rough. Well, I've taken up doing the woodwork and I'm having a blast. I just finished another woodworking project yesterday.
isn't that
It's
great?
it's added something new to my life. So
It's-
there I am on Sahula. The wheel, that's something I do miss having a tiller. I really
Mhm.
miss
Yeah.
that tiller
Yeah.
because doesn't have the feel.
Well,
So, but I guess Larry people always were asking how long we intended to cruise, and Larry used to say, as long as it's fun. Well, unfortunately, because I am in my eighth decade of life, I have to amend that, but I'll just say we're going to keep cruising as long as we're able, because it suits me to a T.
oh, that's wonderful. And of
So,
course,
so there's just a few photographs to share with everyone.
that's the name of this presentation, as long as you're able. That was wonderful, Lynn. Just loved it so much. Loved it so much. You know, one of the reasons that I like to cruise is the people that you meet and you get involved with the community. And you've
Yes.
done that in spades everywhere you've gone. Interestingly enough, you tell a nice story about you pull into an anchorage at night and you drop the hook and somebody says, "Well, welcome, you finally made it." And they had been following you all along on your books and your exploits, and bang, there you were around the world, and they noted it right there. It's pretty fun. Speaking of the people you meet along the way, could you tell us about your 64th birthday? I love that story. I love that story. Where are we in Tonga? Is that where we are?
No, actually, it was in Kirimati, and that is one
Kalimati.
of the Line Islands and south of Hawaii.
Yeah.
And it's very isolated in that it's not on any normal track. The
Hmm.
time we were there, it was exceptionally isolated because even the airlines that used to be that Air New Zealand used to stop there once a week, and the government of Kiribati um, subsidized
Okay.
them stopping and then go on their way to Hawaii and the
Hmm.
way back once a week. And the government ran out of money, so they had to be stopped. And at that time, they didn't know what to do about getting some of the guests. There was a few sport fishermen who were stranded there. But when we arrived there, I think I marked that in the book.
You did, as a matter of fact. I do
What date
believe that
was
we
that?
are, that's, can
Oh,
I,
here it is.
207?
Yeah,
Yeah, let's give a little recap
yeah.
of that first
But
foray.
yeah, so Kiribati is there's no real harbor. You can work in carefully into a little area inside the reef, but it was calm enough. We anchored outside
Yeah.
and landed on the foreshore to find that clearing and customs wasn't easy because nobody could find the customs officials. But we were greeted by some local people. There's about a couple thousand people lived on the island, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll just read about my birthday here. After my first foray ashore, everyone we met greeted us by name, and soon each person we encountered asked if we had any plans to sail onward. 6 days after we'd first sailed in, I mentioned to one of the local women that we planned to leave in a day or two. "You can't," she exclaimed. But she didn't say anything more. Late that afternoon, a fisherman brought his rugged-looking outboard-powered boat, carefully alongside Taliesin and handed me a small woven basket. Nestled on top of a hand of bananas was a printed invitation. Tears clouded my vision as I finished reading the note. How did Teresa know my birthday is this week? I asked. Everyone knows, the fisherman answered. The customs man told us. He knew you would need help to celebrate. 3 nights later, 22 Micronesian voices rang out in exquisite harmony, accompanied by a trio of musicians. A freshly made crown of local flowers adorned my head. A dozen women encouraged both Larry and me to join their dancing, while children darted in and out of the front room of the blue house, too quickly to be accurately counted. We'd not known one person when we sailed into Kirimati. 10 days later, we had a village full of friends who'd worked much of the day gathering and preparing clams, crayfish, and crab, plus one of Teresa's chickens, then stringing festive lights and keeping the wood fire going to create a feast and properly celebrate my 64th birthday. So
Such a beautiful story.
yes.
Oh, Lynn, I'm so
Can
glad.
you see? That's not much of a picture, but
There you are. Yeah, I can see that great. Yeah.
But what I love is the little invitation, which let's see, can people see that?
There you go. Yeah.
So,
Complete with a little picture on it.
picture. So,
That's so great.
it was
And you know,
fun.
isn't that really why we do that? Is to make
Yeah.
that human bond and connect with somebody. So great.
Well, if that's the thing I say to sailors, one of the things we always have to remember, we are the diplomats. No, what's the right word?
Representatives.
Yeah,
maybe.
we are sharing our world with the world we visit, and they are sharing with us. And it's really a wonderful people-to-people
Yeah.
way of having a life and realizing you've got friends everywhere in the world.
And you do. And you remember Larry's wonderful quote that we read is there are no strangers in this room, only friends we haven't met yet.
That's
And
right.
I think that's such a wonderful attitude and so important to cruise with that because it opens you up to these experiences.
Yeah, but he had a good way with quips. He could come up with some great short quips.
I love it.
Yeah.
Now, my friend, you are in New Zealand and you are with a wonderful guy on a nice boat. What are your plans coming up for the next little while?
Well, I got so many, but the most important one is right now we're preparing the boat to head offshore when the cyclone season's over.
Mm-hmm.
And want to sail to the north of the Great Barrier Reef and do some nice diving and snorkeling and catching up with those friends. David did a lot of work saving some of the Barrier Reef Islands from development, and some of the young people that worked with him on that campaign are still working hard to save some of the natural areas of Australia. So we want to encourage them and be with them and his family. When we met, he had no grandchildren. Now he has 7.
Woohoo! Somebody's been working hard.
Yeah, someone's been working, and 5 of them are in Australia. So we want to catch up
wow.
with them.
That's so
But
great.
I'm also just starting on a new book project, and I might try something different. I'm just considering a bit of crowdfunding. I've never done that sort of thing. The only income I get is from people who actually go out and buy my books.
Yeah. Well, you travel so much to promote them too, don't you? Are you still traveling like that?
Well, no, I'm going sailing. I'm going to go sailing. Our expenses drop off when we go sailing, that's for sure. But and David is doing some beautiful artwork, and he's trying to graduate from doing pastels to using water-based oil. So it's lovely when we find a really nice anchorage. You'll find that after we've settled in,
I'm going to look forward to seeing one of those pictures come up. I've had a question here about the green flash. Have you ever seen it? This person asked. It's my friend Jochen.
Actually, I have watched. I have never seen the green flash, and
same with me.
I've just met enough people who can swear by it that I believe in it. I'm going to keep looking.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. We're going to take just a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, while you're hanging here, think of some questions for Lynn, and we're going to take a quick little station break over and take a look at our last commercial here.
This is a pitch to ask you to join us at the American Schooner Association. Founded in 1972, the American Schooner Association is dedicated to the history, preservation, and promotion of the schooner rig. You don't need to be a schooner owner to join the organization, just to be interested in these beautiful boats. As time marches forward, the role that schooners played in the history of our country is fading too. Your membership helps support educational programs and provides a base for preserving these vessels. So, join us. It's inexpensive, important, and we'd love to have you along. We'll see you at amschooner.net.
And there you go. Anyway, welcome back, everybody. And we are with Lynn Pardey. And I've got another question come up. Oh, whoops. Somebody says, what's the green flash about? Say, oh my goodness, well, we talked about that a little bit. But now you are all ensconced down there in New Zealand. You've got quite a life going on. And at the same time, you're going to break away. Tell us about your life down there right now.
Well, it's it's a lovely life because I live on an island that has no roads, which means I don't have to remember to look left or right. But I've been involved here in the community working with, as the political representative when Larry was declining, I took over and got involved in, quote, politics.
Yeah.
And found it really interesting to work with town planners and the community. But I've made an awful lot of wonderful friends here. And now I still keep my fingers in some ways because it's just fun. And with writing in the mornings and sailing, I have a lovely little Matt Hershoff that's called a 12.5, but it's actually 15-foot long keel boat. It's, got a regular lead keel. And
Mhm.
so you can take it out in 25 or 30 knots of wind, even though it's just a day sailor. So between a bit of sailing, a bit of woodworking, right now painting the whole, we're repainting Sahula's steel. And she's 31 years old and built by an amateur. So there's some rough bits of woodwork. And as I've mentioned, I'm involved in doing up the woodwork. And David and I are he's done the rust patrol, and now we're getting ready to repaint the whole deck.
Well, he's lucky to have you, I'll tell you that.
And he said to me, Lynn, you're in your I was down there yesterday. He took a photograph. I should show it to you, but I was taping and preparing the coach roof under the doghouse
Hmm.
to put a new coat of the two-pot paint. And once two-pot paint dries, you can't take it off very easily. So I was taping very carefully. And I was, crawling into this very small space. And he says, I think you actually are in your element doing this sort of thing. And
I think he's right. You're like the Energizer Bunny.
well, it's not. I have spent a lot of time fixing boats and working in boat yards with Larry when we were doing things, and I
Yeah.
do enjoy it. And
Uh,
it's more. I love we have with between friends visiting during the summer. The place is just full. We just had. If anyone reads the Cape Horn book, they'll notice that there's an appendix at the back written by Gordon Gregg, because he was one of the other boats that was hit by the ship at the same time we were. And they've just sailed in, and he's got a new boat and a lovely lady that he's met. She's Japanese,
I'll
and
bet that. Yeah.
and they've just sailed in to spend a couple days here, and the sea stories are flowing. So
Oh, I doubt it.
yeah, it's life is really interesting and good, and and my Facebook friends keep saying, Lynn, if you're ever my way, come and stop in. And I'm thinking, how am I going to fit all of this in? I feel such a
Yeah,
I'm a very fortunate human being, and I know
that's
it.
the nice thing. You know, you've got a lot of very nice comments running along the side. Gaylord Rob wrote a little bit up here, and thanks for the great talk and slides. And he visited Seraphin and Sausalito. And then Laurie writes, no questions, but thanks for such a great and inspiring talk. So
Yes,
once
and
we hang up,
Jacqueline.
yeah, I want you to read through these. They're wonderful.
And
Just
Jacqueline, thank you. You're right. The word I was looking for is that each of us is an ambassador when we visit. And I'll tell you, I get more back from all the people I visit than I give them. That's for
yeah,
sure. But
yeah. Well,
inviting,
you've
one of the
given,
things, can I make a little suggestion to anybody who is going cruising?
yeah,
We all talk about what should we take along for the, to give to the people. I have found what the least sophisticated person to the most sophisticated thing you can give them is invite them on board for drinks or a meal and show them your boat. And even if they don't speak the same language, because people want to know how someone else lives. And one of the things that I don't know how I came up with this idea, but I made an album, not an online one, but an actual paper one of pictures of my family, where I live, and pictures of my home, but and some of my friends, and I just show that to people, and even people that we have really difficulty communicating with, they recognize, oh, that woman, that's your mother. They can tell that's your mother.
I'm so glad you talked about that because it's true. We've
Yeah.
been places, China and Japan, from my point of view, where you sit next to somebody on a bus and she just opens up her purse and says, my daughter or my
Yes.
husband. And
Yes.
absolutely random. It's such an inspiring and fun thing. There are no strangers, somebody writes.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Right.
Harish. Absolutely. This has been so lovely. I want to thank you so much for the time you spent with us. Now, you've been called, my friend, the great enabler for helping people get out on the water and cruise around. And certainly this conversation has been that as well. And thank you so much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any final questions, this is the time to type them in. And we'd love to see what you got. And we are coming in. Lynn, you had a tremendous inspiration for us older women. I can't wait to finish your latest book. I'm 70, and we just finished the Milford Trek, carrying our own pack and gear last year in New Zealand. Sorry I didn't get to visit you, she says. Next
Wow.
time.
Well, David and I just finished some trekking down in the South Island of New Zealand.
Yeah.
And David said he dreamed of living in New Zealand because when he was young, in his 20s and 30s, he used to come here and he, did the Grand Traverse, which is, across the three peaks of Mount Cook. And he said it was my dream country. And so I'm learning why he loved it so much. The South of New Zealand is quite beautiful.
Well, I'm so glad you landed where you were. And from my point of view right now, I'm so freaking glad that this internet connection held.
Yes. And thank you everybody for joining. And I hope I can read these chats afterwards because I can't read them while we're all talking.
You can, and I will send you a transcript once we're finished.
Um,
All right, my friends, I want to thank you so very much for joining us. And we'll go out with our outro. And away we go, Lynn. Thank you so very much. It's been such a pleasure.
fair winds.